Welcome to Comic Book Curious and the team, John Campbell. Tell us your name, your occupation, and here we go.
Yeah, my name is John Campbell. I'm the lead writer at Comic Book Curious, and yeah, very very excited to be part of the team here.
Tell us, you were just starting to tell me before I started, what got you into movies and pop culture? How did that happen?
Man, for as far back as I can remember, that's been my great obsession, particularly movies and comic books. Those always went hand in hand for me. The visual mediums like that, and honestly, I don't remember a time before I was obsessed with them, wanting to make them, wanting to know everything I could about them from the youngest age. And my parents will tell you about that. You know, whether I was a kid watching Siskel and Ebert reviews at like 3, and actively disagreeing with them. Uh, Stuff like that. There's all the adorable stories about me as a kid is telling them about, whether it was memorizing the Star Trek encyclopedia and stuff like that. It's all, I was just always, this was the stuff that really got me going always.
And where were you raised?
Portland, Oregon native, born and raised, still live here. I'm one of the rare Portland, Oregon natives, it feels like, because everybody has moved here. But no, I'm Portland through and through.
And it's a real progressive town. I can't wait to come there for the first time. And the comic book community is robust in Portland.
It is huge. Yeah, it is absolutely huge. We have a lot of the top creators live here, and a lot of the big companies have either started here, like Dark Horse started here, Oni Press started here, Image has now moved here, and their headquarters are actually here in Portland because basically the majority of the comic book industry is here. So almost anything other than Marvel or DC is kind of based out of here.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So what's your type? Because I'm still such a novice and naive in a lot of this stuff. But what I've learned in these classes is superhero comics are now a small part of this massive comic book world. Where do you lean? Are you a superhero guy? Or are you a?
I'm a big superhero guy, big time superhero guy, because I mean that's certainly where I started, like as a kid.
Uh-huh.
But I'm also a big crime comics guy. That's a huge interest of mine. Guys like Ed Brubaker are some of my favorite writers, and also a lot of the sort of oddball horror stuff, whether that be like the Hellboy universe at Dark Horse or things like that. The work of Cullen Bunn I love as well. I'm a pretty eclectic fan in terms of I'm sort of up for any genre if it's a well told story. If you can invest me in the characters and tell me an interesting story, I'm willing to go into almost any world that will give me. I love sci-fi stuff. I'm a huge Trekkie, so any Star Trek stuff I'm going to devour, including the comic books.
So I was speaking with the lady who used to run the Star Trek Foundation, the Gene Roddenberry Foundation, and she was telling me that over half the people in the world are Star Trek fans, or some crazy number,
Yeah.
where it's a ridiculous amount of fans, or at least people that know or watch Star Trek, and knowing that that it's a very kind of progressive platform where people are having sex with aliens and doing all of these things, and it was very much about acceptance, and there's a lot of underpinnings in this world that I don't know much about. My dad was into it, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, that was another thing as a kid that I was so drawn to. I mean, I was a kid in the 90s, so Next Generation is my Star Trek. That's my, and I love all the shows.
Uh-huh.
But Next Generation is the one that feels like home. That's like my comfort show. I go back to those episodes all the time. And it's such a beautiful world that Gene Roddenberry created, because his whole thing was like, this is so far in the future, and not only is humanity still here, but we've solved all the problems. Hunger's gone. Poverty's gone. There's a line that Captain Picard has in Star Trek First Contact where he's talking about how we've eliminated money. And he says the only thing humanity seeks is to better itself. And I just love living in that world. Everybody's getting along. We're united as a planet. We're dealing with the conflicts of other planets and alien races. That's still happening. There are still wars, but they're out in the stars. Here on Earth, it is a beautiful place where everybody gets along.
Boy, that got me a little bit emotional.
I mean, Star Trek, one of the things, I will roll tears at so many Star Trek episodes and movies. It's such a warm and welcoming. I mean, I love Star Wars too, but Star Wars is such a fantastical, world filled with battle sequences and stuff like that. And there's action in Star Trek as well. But that core belief, utopian view of humanity, And that was very much Gene Roddenberry. That was his whole thing, was he's like, we are going to figure it out. I just know it. I have such faith in humanity that sooner or later we're going to figure it out.
Well, we just applied for a Roddenberry Foundation fellowship. They offer 10 a year for 175 grand, and it's over 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, it's 50 grand for 1 year. That's a different one. So if you get it, you not only get the support of the foundation, but you get that money. And what a perfect alignment to what we're trying to do. I mean, you mentioned it, like a couple of those Gene Roddenberry quotes were he deeply cared.
He really did, and it showed through. But he was also very smart at creating compelling characters and a world people get onto, to the point where, and he was doing this in the 1960s as well. So he was talking about war and racism and sexism and all kinds of stuff, but he was couching it in stories about aliens and space. So people kind of it wasn't up front. You go, oh, wait a minute, there's a great episode of the original series called Let This Be Your Last Battlefield, where it's a warring alien race. They're literally split down the middle, black on one side and white on the other. But they each fight the opposite, because if the black on the white on the left side fight the black on the right side, and that's their whole thing, is that they're exterminating each other. Because he's talking about racism and genocide, but it's a sci-fi adventure, so people are just going, this is fun, but also you're learning something.
Wow.
No, he was doing, I mean, one of my favorite stories of him is Nichelle Nichols, who played with her on the original show, came to him about halfway through the first season and said, I think I figured out what you're doing. These are morality stories. And he said, shh, don't tell him. Like, the network can't know, all right? But yes, of course, that's what I'm doing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I interviewed a woman named Chase, who was on Star Trek. Chase McPherson, I believe?
Is it Chase Masterson?
Chase Masterson.
Yeah, she was on Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. So I actually interviewed her
Very
for Comic
cool.
Book Curious.
Yeah.
She's so sweet, and she deeply cares. She's a really wonderful person.
And that's the thing that's been amazing to see, is it sort of feels like once you enter the Star Trek family, whether as a fan or as somebody who participates in the show, those people really carry the values of Star Trek. I was involved in the Trek the Vote movement, which was happening back during the election, which was all Star Trek fans, creators, and actors getting together and holding events to get people out to vote. And so yeah, there's I mean, and it's amazing how many of the Star Trek, Patrick Stewart was at some of these events and stuff like that. I mean, the biggest names in Star Trek got out, because there sort of is almost a responsibility, especially being like a Star Trek cap, that you need to live up to that. It's a lot, because these are such idealized characters in an idealized world, and it seems like a lot of them really carry that forward.
Does the fan base lean towards one political spectrum then?
I would say so. I would say it's such a progressive show. And I would say generally Star Trek fans lean towards a progressive way. So I would say they certainly lean more towards a left. I mean, the show is so much about acceptance and, solving issues. And so, I mean, like it's pretty anti-capitalist to begin. I mean, there's a whole race of characters in Star Trek called the Ferengi that are money obsessed. And they're these like uber capitalists, and they're meant to be this cautionary tale of what happens when you become completely obsessed with that. But at the same time, you have the Vulcans, who are entirely logic based and have cut off emotion, and they're also kind of a cautionary tale, because they inherently lack an empathy, because they have suppressed their own emotions. So there's all these sort of things like that. But yes, empathy and intellect are at the center of Star Trek. So that sort of leans you a certain way, I think. Yeah. And look, I certainly have been online enough to see that there are Star Trek fans who feel the opposite and really rage against the show when it preaches these values. But I'm always fascinated by those people, because I'm like, it's literally been doing that from day one. So I don't know, it's odd to be upset about that, because it was always a very political show.
Yeah, and that's something that Sean Wynn from Strange Solutions was telling me a little bit about, that that trolling is a real thing. And there was even, like you said, when people are raging. And for me, trying to create something that everyone can agree upon is a great idea. But if people are mad that you're diversifying superhero universes and they think that you're trying to put your agenda on them, how far are you willing to bend to placate intolerance of that? And when you look at those people and the percentage of those people, largely white men, in the world of 7.5 billion people or whatever it is now, it's a small a smaller number.
That's what I always say about it. I think it is a very vocal minority. I think they are the people yelling the loudest. But if you look at what is successful, what people are responding to, people can people on YouTube, these white males can scream about Black Panther or Captain Marvel, but both of those movies made over $1 billion. You know, people were into that. People want to see superheroes of color and female heroes at the same. I mean, look at the success of Wonder Woman as well. I mean, there's no question that the underserved audience will come out to something like that, especially when it is something of such quality. Because for years, studios rejected female superhero movies because they would say, well, look at Catwoman, look at Elektra. And I'm like, well, those aren't good movies, though. That's not fair. Like, if you want to compare it to the worst kinds of movies, then sure, yeah, those are horrible. But, you know, they just dropped the ball. But when you see something as good as Black Panther, you can't deny it. And also, to make $1 billion, that can't just be Black people going to that.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Well, it's not, these are not uniquely minority stories. Everybody can get into the story of Black Panther. It's just a great, great story.
I was moved. And when I saw it again the second time with my mom, I was even more moved.
Oh, yeah.
But to see the students that I work with in Harlem and Far Rockaway, to have those conversations, I'll never forget that, man.
I mean, that's the thing, and I've heard so many people say this. Growing up as a white male, I was never underrepresented in any way whatsoever. Every movie was about me, so it's sort of like. But to see that now and to really see how people react, a friend of mine who is a mixed race, he was so taken by Black Panther and just to his soul, and I'm like, I love it, but this meant a whole different thing to him, and just to see it, I'm like, wow, to see that firsthand, you really see the impact that something like that has. And once again, it's the success of that, because these are businesses, is fantastic, because now we are seeing things like Shang-Chi coming out. Yeah. And they're making a Static Shock movie over at DC.
What's that? What's Static Shock?
Static Shock is an inner city Black kid who gets electricity power.
Oh, is that different than Black Lightning?
It's different than Black Lightning. It's somewhat similar, but he's a little bit more of like, he's sort of the DC Spider-Man in that sense, because he's a kid, so he's got electricity powers. He can also like surf around on electricity, so he's almost like surfboarding through. But you have Michael B. Jordan producing that.
Oh, cool.
Which is great, because you have. I mean, that's the other thing too, is we have all these people who are fans of this material, also working in the Hollywood system now, who are bringing that in, going, I grew up loving this. I want this on screen.
My girlfriend's Filipino, and she's been learning about the superhero universe along with me. I mean, I've seen the movies at least, so I went through the whole Marvel series with her, and now we did the DC one, and now she's really into it, and she loves Aquafina, and because she's a comedian. My girlfriend's a comedian and an actress,
nice.
and she is determined to be Wave. You know, she's fit, and she just wants to be Wave. Yeah. And she met Jason Pack. Is that his name? Who wrote it?
Greg Pak.
Greg Pak.
Yeah.
She met him at New York Comic Con, and she has a picture with him, and he follows her on Instagram and laughs at her stuff. So I'm going to interview her maybe tonight or tomorrow, and when he comments on it, I'm going to ask to interview him.
Yeah, he was on my podcast a couple years ago.
Really?
Yeah, I interviewed him when he was here for Rose City Comic Con, which is Portland's comic convention.
Such a sweet guy.
Absolutely, such a sweet guy, and has done a huge amount to introduce more Asian representation in the comic books, whether it be creating like Amadeus Cho, who's the young Hulk character, or Amadeus Cho, very cool character, and has just consistently been. He did a great comic for Dark Horse called Kingsway West that was sort of a fantasy western with an Asian lead. Very cool guy.
Wow.
Who has done a lot of great stuff for comics.
So tell me more about you. Tell me more about you had a podcast, you're a creator, you're a writer, a lifelong nerd, and now you're the coolest thing ever, because nerds used to be not cool, and now nerds are all the coolest thing ever.
It is the bizarrest thing to see. I went from being, I talk about this all the time. When I was a kid, they didn't make movies about superheroes, really. We had a few here and there. They were very rare occurrences. And so you would and also I would watch anything that was terrible stuff because somebody had a cape or a mask. I was just desperate for anything like that. They just didn't exist. So it's insane to see that arc now where they're the biggest things in the world.
Yeah.
And I was also a kid who you got picked on in middle school for being into comics. And now everybody is, I'm like, I was wearing a Spider-Man shirt and people made fun of me. And now Spider-Man makes $1 billion and everybody's obsessed with him.
Right.
And it's interesting because I see people go such a negative route with it sometimes too, where they go like, "Wow, where were you during the dark times of it?" And I think it's just fantastic. I just go, I'm almost like, see, this is what I was saying all these years. It's great, right?
That's amazing.
These characters are great.
Have you been writing about it? Have you been writing your own superhero characters? What's your
from a young age, film was always sort of my big passion. I mean, I love comic books too, right. But I really went. Like being a film director has always sort of been my biggest dream. I want to direct feature films. And so all through high school, I was the kid who made movies, and high school, I kind of had an identity. I wasn't like a popular kid, but I was cool with the popular kids because they're like, we saw that movie. It was funny. Cool. And I was like, that's cool. They're not going to invite me to the party, but nobody's going to make fun of me because I had a thing, And that's what it was. And I was all right with that. I had my circle of friends who read comic books and we talked about movies and stuff. So I was fine there. And so then I went to college to film school and tried to do that. And then basically as the internet has expanded and all this stuff, kind of all my interests are out there in some way. So I've jumped around and done all kinds of stuff. I hosted a morning radio show for a while up in Washington. I've been doing podcasts for about 6 years now. I have a network of podcasts.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's
something. I'm so glad that you're into that because I know nothing about it and I'm trying to create a podcast.
Yeah, I have it's called the Panel Up Network. So it's all pop culture discussion podcasts. We have 4 shows. The main one called Panel Up, which is just kind of weekly reviews of new movies or TV shows. We sometimes do video games and comics as well. Just kind of whatever's interesting in the world of pop culture that week. We'll do a review discussion of it. And we have guests on the show. We've interviewed a number of comics creators and we have people who come on. My co-host Mike Ergoni and I do it, but then we have a pool of contributors who come on weekly and will join in whatever we're talking about. And then I do another show with Mike as well. We do a side show called The Green Mile, where we've been watching episode by episode the 1970s Incredible Hulk series with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. We're actually right at the end of that. We only have about 4 or 5 episodes left to do of that, which has been interesting. Then we're going to go to the 70s Spider-Man show. So we're going to keep sort of old superhero content,
Wow. Wait, I didn't even know there was a 70s I saw in some documentary that there was a spider. They licensed Spider-Man to China or Tokyo
there is a Japanese Spider-Man show, Spider-Man, which we're not covering that, but in the US it only lasted 13 episodes, but we will be covering those 13 episodes. They did try to do, and they didn't have the money or the technology, and that's the thing that I've always been fascinated by. Is like it's always been clear that there is something with these characters. They did the Superman show in the 50s. They every once in a while they come back around to could do something with these characters, but I think it really took technology catching up to be like, okay, now we can fully realize what they should look like. Because it was Batman and Robin going up a wall where they've turned it sideways so it looks like they're climbing up. And I love the Adam West Batman show, but it's a product of its time.
Who is your favorite superhero and why?
I am and always will be from the youngest age a Batman guy. I am a through and through. It's not the most unique answer, but he is just, and I think it is because he is just a guy. He is a guy who just refuses to give up, right? The worst thing ever in the world happened to this guy, and he made a vow to never let it happen to anyone else again. And he just will not deviate from that mission. He is unstoppable, not just as a physical presence, but as a intellectual, which I find great. He thinks his way out of every situation. That's what I love about Batman. You can't throw him anywhere where he's not going to be like, I've already come up with these 7 scenarios that I could get out of this. He builds the gadgets. He has the coolest car in all of comics, the Batmobile. And I love that he can stand side by side with all the gods in the Justice League. That there are times when even Superman has to turn to Batman and say, what are we going to do? I love that. I just think he's just an amazing character. And I've always been so moved by that story ever since I was a kid. And once again, growing up in the 90s, I was lucky that I grew up on Batman, the animated series, which is just like the greatest superhero show. And it's just a perfect distillation of that character. Between that and I am also wearing a Tim Burton Batman shirt because those movies, I wore out my VHS copy of that first Batman movie. I just watched it again and again and again. Love Keaton's performance as Batman, and I'm so excited he's going to come back, which I've been clamoring for forever. Please, he's still the greatest Batman.
Well, I really like Christian Bale too. I thought he was
Bale
fantastic.
is great. Bale is a great Bat. I mean, everybody who's played the part has brought something to it. That's what I enjoy. I mean, I think Clooney the least of all, but and I love Clooney.
Ben Affleck's performance, because I don't like to be I don't like to say, I try to stay away from anything negative. I try to find the best possible thing to say, just as a rule of thumb. Because
I think that's great. I look, I am known on my podcast as the guy who likes everything. So
tell me how you felt Ben Affleck did, because it was very hard for me to get it.
Batman is a very specific take on Batman, right? It is an older, bitter, angry Batman, which the thing I think that you have to keep in mind, especially about anything that Zack Snyder makes, is Zack Snyder is a huge comic book fan, but of a very specific era of comic books. And it's that late 80s dark, when it was Frank Miller doing The Dark Knight Returns. It's all about breaking these heroes down. It's also why he made Watchmen, right? It's all about the heroes at their darkest, lowest moment. And so his Batman that he has Affleck playing is very much Frank Miller's Batman from Dark Knight Returns, a guy who is at the end of his rope, who is just filled with rage and violence, and isn't going to be the one you take your kids to exactly. And so I enjoy it, especially because I do enjoy that Affleck, more than any of the other actors, physicalizes Batman the way he is in the comics. He is a huge, hulking, imposing force. Batman in the comics is scary, or he can be, certainly. And I do think Snyder and Affleck really capture that aspect of it. When he shows up, criminals are like, oh my God, and they just are stopped in their tracks at this horrific figure in front of them. And I think Bale captured that certainly in pieces, particularly in Batman Begins as well. But I do like that aspect of it. I mean, Affleck would not be at the top of my list, but I mean, and I love Affleck. I love him in so many other things.
Right.
And I'm a huge fan of him as a director.
Yeah.
In particular. But he is playing out Snyder's vision based on the comics that Snyder's a fan of. So one of the things I love about superheroes and comics is they've been around for so long that so many different people have done their take on it, right? There's so many different versions of these characters, and they're so malleable in that sense that you can twist him that way and twist him this way, and he's still Batman, but he's this kind of take on it. And like any comic book fan, I have my Batman versions that I like more than other ones, but all of it is the spectrum of Batman. And you can say that about any of the characters who've been around for decades.
Yeah, I mean, it's a longer conversation, but I would love to get a tutorial on the Batman through the decades, right? We all know about Adam West. Well, not we all, but I mean, I at least know about Adam West, and I never did really watch the cartoon. I missed that, but I mean, I've seen the movies, but I actually just turned on. I don't know. You could tell me, what was it? Who was the Joel Schumacher? Was it Val Kilmer with?
It was Val Kilmer in the first Joel Schumacher, and then it was George Clooney in the second Joel Schumacher.
Who played when Tommy
Lee Jones, Two-Face, and Batman Forever, and Jim Carrey, the Riddler.
Yeah, and I just saw it just was on the TV the other day, and I kind of saw it and I went, oh, this is really stylistic. Like this was all really decided upon, that it was going to be,
Yeah, it is highly stylized, as is a lot of Joel Schumacher's work. He was the guy who designed the Macy's window displays before he was a director. So he's very set design, colors. It's very poppy. Yeah. His Batman. And I think Batman Forever works more than Batman and Robin, because I think Batman and Robin kind of falls into that's now overriding everything. I think Batman Forever kind of walks a nice line, and I think Kilmer's actually a good Batman, but then it kind of all just falls over into the style over it. And Schumacher said that. I mean, I think one of the best audio commentaries I've ever heard on a DVD was Schumacher talking about Batman and Robin, because he was very look, this got away from me. I've never heard a director be more honest when he's like, I don't know, man. Like they were throwing all this money at me, and there was all this expectation. You got to sell toys, and look. And at some point he goes, "If you like the first Batman, you didn't like this one. I'm sorry. Like I've
Oh,
never
wow.
directed be that honest." So I really gained a lot of respect from him for that. Where he goes, like, I kind of whiffed on this one.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Oh, it's cool talking to you and learning about that. So, anyway, Comic Book Curious, as I've kind of said to you before, we're really trying to focus on those stories, those human interest stories, because you will, I mean, you probably go, is it Blender or Bleeder? You know, there's all these comicbook.coms and
Yeah.
what is it? Blender? Bleeder?
Blender. Yeah, I think it's Blender. And
There's
there's
anyway, there's a
comic
hundred
book
different
resources as well. Yeah, there's a lot.
where people go on, they learn about the next production, they learn about the lore, who would win in a battle, Thor or Hulk, or
Yeah.
all that stuff, which is fun. Like I get it from Quora all the time, and I'm like clicking on it and like, well, who would win in a battle?
Yeah.
That's not our lane. Our lane is who are the creators and how can we get them involved, and or the creators and the curators, right? Because people's opinion matters, and you might come at something and be like, "Oh my God, Joel Schumacher for me was the best Batman director for this thing," and I have to be like, "Wait, well, okay, tell me," because that's valid. It's all valid, and I just want to create a space where people are heard and they're encouraged. And I actually had a conversation on Slack today. I don't know if you saw it, but it was basically saying, "Hey, I want to do comment sections
That's obvious.
for
Yeah.
yeah for our blogs." And a couple of the blog writers and Sean were like, "Nah, not yet. It's not a good idea." And I get it, because kids, when you're working with kids, they're like, "Are you going to enable the comment sections in our YouTube videos?" And I'm like, "No, we will not," because they're petrified of being just dragged through the mud.
It's a
And
free for all, no question about it, and often leans towards the absolute worst sides of people.
and especially when this game is developed, and I know that video games, they're really cracking down on it, Overwatch, and they're like, look, if you do it, they've got all these ways to check people and suspend them, and
You have to, because it just ruins the fun of it. It ruins. It's just, and I think there are people who just, unfortunately, their instinct is to, whether or not they even believe the stuff they're saying, is just to kind of mess with people. It's that trolling thing that's unfortunately overrides a lot of stuff. Because once again, they're the loudest people in the room.
yeah, well, so we'll talk more about it offline about the development of the game, but we're trying to do something innovative that will actually, because what else is also true from what I've learned and talked about, reciprocity is also very cool in gaming, with tipping and different ways that if you can get the right people involved, there's a way that people start caring deeply about each other, even if you've never even met the person. So we're going to be focusing on that in a kick-ass way, not in like a fluffy way. Okay, cool. What is your favorite thing to do when not working? Is it gaming? Is it watching movies? Is it shooting movies? Or is your job shooting movies? And what?
My favorite thing to do is probably watching movies, and honestly, especially in quarantine during this pandemic, I've watched a ton of, and I've been making like movie marathons for myself. I've been studying different filmmakers where I'll watch through an entire filmography of somebody's work. I'll watch through a franchise or something like that, and I am very fascinated by the way movies evolve, whether that's in a franchise or in someone's career. Watching from movie one to movie whatever is very interesting to me to see how stuff evolves over time. So yeah,
You know what
I'm
you
ever a
remind me
student.
of a little bit in the best possible way? So I was just listening to this podcast called Smartless.
Yes, the with Bateman and Arnett. Yeah,
Yeah,
love
and
those guys.
Sean Hayes,
Hey,
and they just had Ted Sarandos on.
head of Netflix.
Yeah,
Yeah,
head of
Hunt.
content,
Yeah,
which is different, right?
yeah.
And he started in not video game, but video tape distribution. That was his thing. And then, so he was a seller of content, and then he became the head of content. And it's been such a cool podcast to listen to. This guy who's running a lot of the world with
Yeah.
a yes or no, and I feel like you have that type of vision of being able to be like, I have so much knowledge, and I love my knowledge, and I love leaning into this, and I love being a champion of creators, which is what he is at his core.
Absolutely, yeah. I appreciate that comparison. I
Yeah.
have so much respect for what he's built with Netflix.
Yeah.
And it really is, the reason I love it so much is it really is a place where people can come and make what they're passionate about. There's a reason why they're getting some of the biggest film. I mean, Martin Scorsese makes his movies exclusively for Netflix now because they'll give him the money he needs and get out of his way. I think that's great. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so excited to see what he's doing.
And I think everybody's going, oh, I guess that's what we got to do now. Hopefully that it will shift the industry.
Yeah, oh, completely. Because I mean, unfortunately, the reason people talk about why don't they make, why there's so many bland movies or whatever is because they're noted to death. They're take something that's somebody's vision, and you just go, well, wait a minute now. According to our math on this, and based on the performance of that movie, we need to kind of, and you can see it. I see so many movies where I'm going, that was an anonymous film. I can't tell who made it. There's no style or personality to it. And it feels like it was made by committee because it was essentially.
Oh, I am so glad we met. This is great. Okay, tell me something funny or weird that happened during a signing at a convention or something that you've been.
The thing I always love about conventions, or one of the things I love is to see. I mean, the cosplay is amazing, right?
Yeah.
But I always love to see the human moments of the people in the cosplay, So it's seeing a guy dressed as Wolverine take a hit from an inhaler. It's seeing Batman there was a guy in a beautifully created Batman Michael Keaton costume, and his wife is stuffing paper towels on the cowl because he's sweating so much. It's just that adding that real world thing, seeing stormtroopers speak to each other via their comms, so they're talking like this, but they're going, do we want to go to Burger Bill? Yeah, I think we can do that. Stuff like that. I just love that. I love that it's people, they look the part, but they're still just people. So
I feel like there's a little documentary in that. Have you thought about that?
I haven't. That is definitely a good idea because it's just nice. I mean, it's because it's just the passion, but or even to see like guys. I love the guys dressed up as the super scary characters, like almost bumping into Jason Voorhees, having him going, "Oh, excuse me," he's in this like gory hockey mask with the machete, but he's still like, oh, sorry, I've got to go this way.
That's great.
I just think that those are always my favorite moments of seeing those moments where I'm like, oh yeah, that's still just Dave or whatever.
Is there one standout best Comic-Con experience that you've had?
There's been a few. I mean, okay, there was one where I got to, and I have a picture with them. I got to meet both William Shatner and Adam West. Like Adam West, a few years before he passed away. And as a kid, my greatest heroes were Captain Kirk and Batman. So the fact that I have a picture with me standing with Captain Kirk and Batman is something I very much treasure.
That's cool, man. That's very cool. What is your superhero power now?
What one would I want?
Both questions. What one would you want, and what do you actually have? What do you feel your power is now as John?
Well, the one I've always wanted is because people always talk about like flight or invisibility. I want that Wolverine healing ability. That's awesome, man. Like you're never sick, you're never getting hurt, really. That just seems awesome.
Wolverine's healing ability faster than Deadpool's?
Ooh, that's a good question. They're pretty comparable. Wolverine has the advantage that his skeleton is made out of indestructible metal, though.
Yeah.
So they're like you can't. I don't know. So there's more. No, I think Deadpool's maybe a little faster, but Wolverine is more resilient with that metal skeleton, is what I would say.
Got it.
And that right there is every conversation comic book fans have, where it's like, well, let me think about that.
Is that right? Did I just?
You just engaged in like a comic book store conversation.
Oh, that's cool.
That's what it is when you start, and because anytime you can make a comic book fan go, well, wait a minute. And you're suddenly going through every issue you've ever read of a thing, going like, I guess the Flash would be faster or whatever, because my actual power, I mean, it's got to be retention of information, right? Like it's got to be. It is. I'm, and that goes. That's not just pop culture stuff. I'm very good with people's names, which I'm so thankful for because my father is the worst person. My father can't remember anybody's name, the title of anything. He's the guy who's always telling me, I watched this movie last night. It was, you know what it was. I'm like, you've given me no clues as to what it was. It's the thing with the guy and the, whatever. So yeah, I'm so thankful that I got because, and that's not like old age. He's always been like that. He was like, just never, who's that guy? Yeah, I'm pretty good at that. But yeah, I remember things and I do it all the time with like my friends because I still hang out with. Most of my friends have been my friends like since high school, and I'll go like, "Oh yeah, remember that girl?" Blah, and my friend's like, "No," Like,
Right.
yeah, she went to school with us. She wasn't our friend, but like I remember everybody's name.
That's funny.
Yeah.
What about, speaking of your parents, not your parents, what about a superhero that you think you know? Or just a hero? Because when people call people superheroes, it's a little weird. Who's a
Yeah.
hero that you know
In
in
let's
real
see.
life? And then maybe someone that you want to have lunch with or you want to work with, right? So
Yeah.
that's a two-part question.
Okay. A hero I know in in real life. Well, I'll start with the second part of it, and then again, give me time to think about the people I know in reality. But like somebody who I would love to work with, a person who I really relate to and I would love to collaborate with, and he's such a hero of mine as a filmmaker is Quentin Tarantino.
Hmm.
That guy, I just think he's a genius.
Hmm.
Like when he puts a movie out, that is as big a deal to me as any Marvel or Star Wars or anything. That is French. I got to see that opening day, and I've got to see it multiple times. I mean, I have a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood poster hanging over my TV right now. I'm just such a nerd for his stuff, and because I love dialogue more than anything in stories and stuff like that. So all my favorite filmmakers are like him and Aaron Sorkin and people who just write brilliant, smart dialogue.
Okay, I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I'm not turning into a snob. I'm definitely not. I love action movies. That's what I watch because I'm usually working while I'm watching, right? Or I'm working out or doing something.
Yeah,
But I recently watched, I'm just like your dad, Bone and Shadow, and now I'm watching
Jupiter's Legacy.
Jupiter's Legacy.
Yeah,
And I turned on yesterday Yakuza because my buddy's like, "Have you seen Yakuza?" And I'm like, "No, I don't even know what that is." So I turned it on. As I was watching Jupiter's Legacy, I went, "I love this concept. I love that they go back in time. I love that. I mean, I think the acting pretty much for some of it is really good."
yeah,
But I was thinking, and I had this thought as well well, more so with this, but I thought, I wonder what the comic book writers think of this because you can destroy something really cool with shitty dialogue.
yep.
And the magic of screenwriting, which is why I've been learning. Like when I saw Jumanji, and I laughed out loud for the whole time
Yeah.
with Chris, with The Rock and Kevin Hart, and of course Jack Black, hysterical, right? But I thought, who wrote these jokes? They
Yeah.
are so funny, and even like someone like Will Ferrell with we just watched Talladega
Oh,
Nights again.
I mean, that guy, I ripped him off so much in high school. He was so my comedy hero. I made so many videos where I was doing a Ron Burgundy type character, whatever, because I just thought I had never seen anybody be that funny in something and that real. Like as silly as they are, like these feel like people. I think that's the key to the dialogue, right? Is like Ron Burgundy is such a well-defined character. Ricky Bobby is such a well-defined character, and he plays them with such sincerity too. And he writes those movies as well,
Right.
which is yeah. I just oh man.
So I think for comic book curious, tell me if you think this is a bad idea. What are the best? Because I like heard one or two lines, and I was like, right, and I
Mhm.
thought, what if we did like top 10 moments of the week, top 10 quotes, or and
Ooh,
then and
yeah,
then top 10 fails of the week, right? Where it's
yeah,
like, "Meh, meh," like, come on, guys. And again, in fun, not making fun of people being like, because I think that could maybe generate traffic. Would be like, all right, who's gonna what are the top 10 of the week? And someone like you and your friends would know that shit just because you watch it and you retain it.
mhm,
I would never be able to participate in something like that because I just don't know enough.
yeah,
But I think that it would be a fun conversation for you to have with other people that know shit.
yeah. Absolutely.
Cool.
Uh, yeah, because all the time I'm constantly seeing good and bad examples.
Yeah, just
Uh,
like, excuse me, write
yeah.
that down.
Yeah, I mean it's I do a whole podcast. Actually, one of the podcasts on my network is a show called The Action Shelf, where myself, my partner Michael Listman, we watch only like straight to video B level action movies, and the dialogue in those is just hilarious. Sometimes the just awkward lines, the things that don't fit. That show's a lot of fun because we just get to and honestly, it makes us better writers sometimes by being able to look at something and identify why it's not working, that makes you a better writer.
Have you checked out Stage 32 or Save the Cat for your own writing? And
I have, I took a Save the Cat class actually. I love that book and all the Blake Snyder's teachings there,
mm, yeah,
because there's a lot of good, valuable stuff in there. And also, I think particularly Save the Cat, there's a lot of very common sense kind of stuff. It doesn't get lost in theory. It's very much like, oh yes, okay, I see. I have seen movies where they do that or whatever. It's very approachable.
that's
Uh,
cool.
yeah.
So the dream is working in Hollywood on big movies and
Yeah.
helping direct and write them.
And right, yeah, that would be it. And I mean, writing comic books as well would also be a huge thing. And I have a couple of comic book scripts I have lying around that I've tried to I want to go out and pitch, because
Well,
yeah,
I will definitely loop you in on what we're doing with Adam and
please
Sean,
do,
and
yeah,
I'd love to hear your opinion.
yeah.
What have you written about? What are these scripts?
So I mean, one of the pitches I have is a sort of horror action thing. That my loose pitch for it is Supernatural meets the X-Files with a little bit of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay.
That's kind of my basic pitch for it. But it's government agents fighting monsters and that kind of stuff, because that's a huge part of my love of like movies. I love John Carpenter, and particularly sort of that '80s horror.
He was
vibe.
Beetlejuice, John Carpenter?
That was Burton. John Carpenter was The Thing and Halloween. Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Escape from New York, one of my favorites. Very sort of dark, cool, synthy scores and stuff like that. Very stylistic and edgy. I love his stuff. I also love Burton as well, hence the Batman. But Beetlejuice is a great one too. But yeah, so I mean, just creating. I mean, my mind is ever firing ideas for stories and characters and things. I almost struggle to get them down on paper. It seems like sometimes.
Oh,
So
that's so cool. That's
yeah.
so cool. What social awareness? I mean, we talked a little bit about having progressive issues or having tolerance for people, but is there some social awareness thing that you think about a lot?
I mean, once again, being in the comics fandom community, and I distance myself from it, which makes me sad because of this stuff. I do think a lot about tolerance and diversity and things like that, where it's just it any kind of prejudice or anything just makes no sense to me. So when I bump up against it, it really just baffles me. It
Yeah.
really does. So I'm a big supporter of Black Lives Matter and things like that, because I can't comprehend the lack of empathy people have.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. Like I just, and I said, yeah, racism, anything like that, I don't get it. I don't, and I see, I mean, people talk about just, and I occasionally, because I will occasionally watch people from the other side that I just to hear what they're saying. And so much of it sounds so unreasonable to me. I'm just like,
Yeah.
why refuse to use someone's pronouns? Like, what does it matter to you? Like,
Yeah.
where I don't get it. Like, it harms me in no way, and it makes this person feel more like them. That's great. Like, I
Yeah.
that's the thing where why am I in? Why do I care what other people are doing if they're not hurting anyone? That's
Yeah.
kind of my whole thing. Is so that's big for me. Is
Yeah.
that, it really saddens me to see that so many people don't seem to take the message of the things that they claim to be fans of. Comic books, I mean, Stan Lee was right. I mean, the X-Men is about racism and acceptance, and it's not hidden at all. It's in there. So I don't know how you can claim to be a fan of this stuff and then go, I don't care for these people, or keep them out of comics. Or anytime anybody says keep politics out of comics, I'm like, what are you talking about? They've literally been there from the start. Superman was created by a couple of Jewish guys who felt weak and bullied by people, and
Yeah.
it's all, I mean, it's an immigrant story. Like, it's insane to me that people can't see that. Some people, and I really truly do believe it is a vocal minority within the community. And because most comic book fans I actually interact with on a day-to-day basis are not these kind of people.
That's
So
great.
I rarely run across them. I certainly, when I worked in a comic book store, I ran across a few. When I worked with Sean in a comic book store. So yeah, Sean and Martin actually. Yeah, we all worked in the same company. So yeah, I just, so that's big to me. I just, and I think a lot of that honestly comes from the fiction I was raised with, Star Trek, comic books, that kind of things. Those ingrained that in me,
Yeah.
that morality and empathy.
That's so cool. Can you do anything quirky? Can you do an impression or eyebrows or anything that
Yeah.
people?
Yes, I do voices because another side career that I have is as a voice actor. In fact, I do a show here in Portland called the Tesla City Stories. That is, we do live readings in front of audiences of 1940s radio scripts. Yeah, it's literally the most fun I have doing anything. I love it so much, and we've been shut down, for the last year plus, but we're finally gonna. Looks like we're gonna come back in the fall and
Oh,
get to
that's
do that
cool.
again. We do it in a theater in downtown Portland. It's great. It sells out. People love it. But that requires me to do a whole bunch of accents and voices. And I've always mimicked people as a kid and stuff like that, celebrities and things. I'm so fascinated by the tones of people's voices and the differences in them. And so, as a kid, I was always trying to mimic people. And I'm not saying I'm the world's greatest impressionist, but I pick up things here and there. Or if I'm just watching somebody, other politicians, right? You watch a speech, and I'll just, as I'm doing it, try to kind of match their voice, and just be like, how is this guy talking? What do I need to do?
Are
Um,
you a fan of Sammy Davis Jr.?
Big time. Love Sammy.
So, I mean, he's one of my absolute heroes. And when he would sing a song with in 30 different characters or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, you go, you can't match that type of talent. And then he would play the horns and drums and tap
That
dance. And,
that guy was just an entertainment machine. There's no
yeah.
question about it. Yeah, I mean, he could do anything.
Well, let's hear a couple impressions. Go for it.
Here's the thing. I used to do impressions a lot, like in high school and stuff like that. And nobody ever knew who. I've always been drawn to old entertainment. So
Great.
so all my impressions are like of weird dead people.
Great.
So like I love old horror movies. So I do like a Vincent Price, where he's sort of got this sort of creepy tone to his voice. He's up here. It's a tale of the macabre. Or I would do Paul Lynde from Hollywood Squares. And he's just kind of like he's almost up here. He's just kind of this guy, he's talking like that. And he's almost too hilarious to finish the sentence. So I would do stuff like that. Like, and I'm a huge Bond fan. So I would always do like sort of a Sean Connery type, just kind of in that sort of range. Because I've just always been fascinated by, there's a character I do in Tesla who is a very shouty version, but he's kind of an Al Pacino type. So that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love it. You're a talented dude.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. I was very thrilled to find that Tesla City show and finally have an outlet for all
Man,
pieces that are ever swimming around in my head.
I am so glad we met. All right, 1 or 2 word answers. Ready?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Favorite feel good movie or show?
Star Trek: Next Generation.
Comfort food.
Mac and cheese.
Song you sing in the shower.
It is Duran Duran's theme to A View to a Kill.
Sweet or salty?
Sweet.
Fly or teleport?
Teleport.
Top 3 songs you're feeling right now.
All my favorite songs by Weezer. Let's see. Shame Shame by the Foo Fighters. And let's throw a curveball and say Masquerade by Berlin.
Ooh.
Gonna go back to the past with that one. I do love the Duran Duran and Berlin reference, where I love 80s music.
That's cool. Cyclops or Wolverine?
Wolverine.
Introvert or extrovert?
Introvert.
Super strong or super smart?
Super smart.
Beach, mountains, or forest?
Beach.
Favorite non-male superhero?
Captain Marvel.
Favorite author and favorite illustrator?
Favorite author, I'm gonna go Ed Brubaker. And illustrator, Chip Zdarsky.
Cool. And we'll be able to find Chip and pull his art for this interview.
Yeah. Chip does great stuff. Cool. He's also a really good writer as well as an artist too. He's one of those annoying people who's super talented at both.
That's cool. Do you know either of those guys?
I have talked to Chip a little bit, but I wouldn't say I know him super well.
Okay, ready? 2 more questions.
Sure.
Top 3 movies.
Okay. Blade Runner, Fargo, and Tim Burton's Batman.
Ooh. New York or Chicago style pizza?
I'm a Chicago. I'm a thick deep dish guy. So.
Wow. Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes.
All right. That is the end of our interview. I am so happy to know you.